Hello everyone, I am Dr. Edouard Broussalian and I am very pleased to take this opportunity to speak about the situation regarding the pandemic treaty, or rather the potential future pandemic treaty. It is true that having been a homeopathic doctor for about 40 years, and in fact I even studied medicine specifically to become a homeopathic doctor, I've been describing the system we find ourselves in today for a long time. It was easy to predict this because in its very structure, industrial allopathic medicine contains this totalitarian potential, this bureaucratic potential. We saw this during the COVID crisis. Doctors found themselves completely stripped of the ability to manage the epidemic, being forbidden to prescribe because it was necessary to create the impression that only the vaccine was a possible treatment and that therefore there was no other treatment worthy of the name, except for hiding away like rats in holes. And in this confiscation of medicine, most doctors let it happen without saying a word. They accepted all the freedom-restricting measures. They didn't say anything against mask wearing, even though everyone knew it was completely absurd. Already, its usefulness can't be proven in an environment like an operating room, so you can imagine what it's like in a public setting. So, what I'm getting at is that this confiscation of medicine by bureaucracy was largely predictable because the very structure of modern medicine is that of a hierarchical society. There are no medical laws in this field, unlike homeopathy, which fortunately shows that there are laws to bring about healing and laws to choose a remedy. In conventional medicine, it's all just trends which are backed by statistics that are obviously manipulated by the industry that wants to sell you its product. And how is it done? Well, they hold consensus meetings. Much like during the COVID crisis, when we were presented with completely crazy models that were just simple simulations, in medicine we were served consensus meetings. Basically, what is progress in industrial medicine? It's when specialists, what we call key opinion leaders, meaning people with extensive knowledge in their field, gather together, preferably in 18-star hotels paid for by the pharmaceutical company, and ultimately, in the end, decide that for a year, this is how things will be done. Obviously, you can see how this works. It's already a kind of state structure, a caricature of a pyramid, where a few supposedly thinking heads at the top dictate their will to the masses. And that's how things unfold. Since there are no rules, no laws, the result is tragic, and this will only be amplified by an opaque, unelected, bureaucratic system like the WHO, where everyone knows that for the first time, the person heading the WHO is not a doctor, and that this person is already being prosecuted for war crimes, or even worse. And everyone knows it's an open secret that he was put there by his friend Bill Gates. So you see that we, ordinary citizens, are now being held hostage in a trap that will only keep closing in on us. Can you imagine a pandemic being managed from behind a desk by a handful of technocrats who will dictate to us what we should do? It's obviously a world turned upside down, or rather like walking on your hands. So, in my brief message, I urge you to resist, and to do everything you can to prevent this treaty from being concluded. It will be the prelude to the enslavement of peoples, and probably to a global governance that will be, I believe, even more terrifying than what we saw with the technocratic example of COVID management. And I remind you in this regard that the guilty parties are still at large. People like Mr. Berset, who imposed this mandatory vaccination on us, let me remind you, committed exactly the same crimes as those for which the Nazis hanged at Nuremberg were accused. At some point, we will have to decide either to enforce the law, and in that case, perhaps we can live in a somewhat normal world, or to give up on enforcing any law, and then indeed it becomes the law of the jungle and the strongest prevail, namely the corporations and their unlimited financial power. Thank you very much for listening to me up to this point.